that's true. Naked Palpatine.
Oh, you pick that one. Fresh out of the clone tank, nude Palpatine is my
Well, that's the first thing I think of when you say Dark Empire Palpatine.
Hello everybody, and welcome to the month of The Long Price Quartet by Daniel Abraham, which I was been on my radar for a while because of mostly due to Samwise. I mean, he wasn't the first person to talk about it, but it's the first time that I found out about it. And then also was it Red Fury, Red 5? One of those names did a discussion, and then Talking Stories did discussion. A lot of booktubers talked about it, but I don't know. For something just made me go, I'll read this now. Really, I don't know exactly what made me decide that, but I was like, it's 4 books. If it goes for my release schedule of every Thursday or every Sunday or whatever, then that is that's a month of just the Long Price Quartet. For some reason, it sounded like a good idea to me, I guess. Along with a little bit of a future. For a long time, and this is years before I got into fantasy or contemporary fiction or classical literature. I'm a big fan of the Star Wars Expanded Universe, right? So there's another series, a fantasy series, also kind of sci-fi, a little weird, written by one of my favorite Expanded Universe authors, Matthew Stover. He wrote a series called Heroes Die. And that's also 4 books, so I thought that could be another solid month. So those are some plans and fruitions in terms of fantasy for the Sunday slot anyway. But the Long Price Quartet, book 1, A Shadow of Summer, or In Summer, is a very slow-paced book. A lot of the consequences in terms of the world are very political, and there's no big war. There's no real fight scenes. I mean, there's a couple instances of violence, but in terms of action, if that's what you're going into this book for, you're going into it for the wrong reasons. You're going into it for the world building, like the way that when people have conversations and stuff, it's not just what they say, it's their body language and mannerisms that kind of indicate what you mean by something. Which is interesting, as a lot of cultures in real life have something similar to that. So that's cool. But also in terms of magic, not very hard to explain like a hard magic system, but also doesn't seem to be a very big magic system either. As far as I'm aware, in terms of magic, the only thing we really have is with the poets, who you will learn about in this book if you decide to read it, who make an Andat. And an Andat is like an aspect of yourself, kind of, that becomes like a demigod that can do stuff. If that makes any sense. So you kind of like a clone version of you, sort of, kind of, called an Andat. But it's also like kind of meta in the sense that an Andat is like a work of art. Whether you write a book or you paint a picture or you direct a movie or you write a screenplay, or maybe like I'm trying to do, you act, and whatever your intentions are behind that acting, because there's several factors when it comes to that. You have what the director wants, and what's written down in the script, and then what the actor does. Now, all those things are usually intent to align. You can't just go, I'm going to go act sad when you want me to be happy. But there is a sort of nuance in facial features and what you may be feeling in the moment that could add some subtext, and that's interpretive by other people, like a simple smile could just be the director's going, that guy's happy right now, and then and a viewer can infer a lot of other things from that. So my whole point is, whatever form of art you are taking, the moment you release it, it is then up to everyone else to kind of, the death of the author, they say, it stops being yours and kind of becomes its own. And so we have that kind of personification with Anandat, which is, again, an aspect of this person. And with this particular, this isn't the only Andat in the universe of this world, but it is the only one we get explicit, intimate time with, at least for this one book. The character's name is Seedless, which is the Andat. The thing about Seedless, and this is very light spoilers, but the poet, I guess we could consider them the wizards of this world. I don't know. I have to read more books in this series. They're only 4 books, by the way, and they're only like, another thing I should mention is they're only like 250 pages, give or take. They're around 200, right? So these are shorter books, but they pack a lot and do a lot emotionally, world building wise, and everything else in a short span of time. It's incredible. And apparently each book takes place like 16 years after the fact. So you get to see these characters young, older, you get to see a whole life of a person. So I'm looking forward to that. But anyway, back to Seedless. The person who made him, and we'll get into that in spoilers, but without saying the name, the person who made him was not tranquil, was not perfectly at peace with themselves when they made the Andat. And this is what's so interesting about this whole idea. He hates himself. And that's like a subconscious thing. It's not like he every day just like, I mean, by the time we read the book, yeah. But he doesn't like himself. And that mistranslates when he makes the Andat into the Andat hating him. Hates himself and hates his creator, and actively seeks to cause problems for this person and to kill him, which would also kill the Andat, or at least that version of the Andat. Because you can reclaim an Andat, but by reclaiming an Andat, you have to like use a piece of you, which would then alter what that thing is, because it wouldn't be this previous person's aspect. It's weird. It's complicated. I'm sure I'll get more answers in the following books. But that is the biggest part of the magic system as I've seen it so far. And Seedless is very important because he does a bunch of stuff for like the agriculture. It's a bit confusing. There's a lot of political shenanigans going on, but Seedless is actually very important despite how flawed he is. And so if anything were to happen, that would cause a lot of upheaval. But I think what this book excels in, because I'll say like the prose are good. They're not phenomenal. They're not okay, and they're not poor. It's very non-distracting. Sometimes you read prose, like you read a Cormac McCarthy, or you read Name of the Wind, like I have above here, which I still have to get to, but I've skimmed it. And you look at the prose, you're like, oh, you're eating it up. You're eating up the sentences alone, But that's not like this. It's very subtle, But there are good sentences. There are good conversations. There are good moments in here, absolutely. And so with this character, or with the several characters we get, there's so much intimacy and closeness, and I don't know, just like it feels like you're barging in on a conversation a lot of the time on real people, which is really good. Like I said, I mean, I've read 4 Wheel of Time books, okay? I still need to read the rest, but I've read 4. 4 books, all which are 500 pages or more, and I'm not in love with a single character. A single book by Daniel Abraham, 200-something pages, and in that short span of pages, I have grown to immensely care about several characters in this world. That's a testament to Daniel Abraham and the skill of his writing. But yeah, we mostly just focus on this town or this city, I guess. One little corner of the world. Like it's not, again, it's not some Game of Thrones where we go from King's Landing to all the way across the continent. Like it's just this one place, and we focus on several different characters within that place. And I'm sure it sets up a ton for the future that I'm not seeing now because I haven't read the future books. But it was a really good time. I cannot stress that enough. Um, do you want to not go through like a 13 book series like Wheel of Time or read 10 books with half of them over 1,000 pages that is Malazan Book of the Fallen? I mean, I love it and I think you should. But if you want something shorter, that's not a huge long series, it's 4 books, so 4 and done, then this may be right up your alley because it won't take you forever to finish and it's good quality. So, I mean, many people have talked about this book already, at least on the YouTube sphere. But, I'm giving my 2 cents, and I think it's worth your time. So, if you haven't already from YouTubers that are better than me, you should definitely be reading this book when you have the chance to. There's more I could have said. There are other videos you can watch where they go even more in depth. But I'm getting into some spoilers. So if you don't want any spoilers, well, there is the door. So first off, gonna name off a couple people. We have Tahi Kovo. We have Oto. We have Mila Kovo. We have well, we'll keep going with the names, but I have a couple things on the phone. This is all just in the prologue, by the way. Hold on. I wonder, the old man said, how many realize we are teaching them nothing. We teach them all letters, numbers. Any of them could take a trade after they leave the school, but nothing of use, nothing of poetry, nothing of the Andat. If they realize that, Most High, they're halfway to your door. And for the ones who turn away, it's better, Most High. Is it? Tahi shrugged and looked into the fire. He looked older. The Dai Kovo thought, especially about the eyes, but he had met Tahi as a rude youth many years before. The age he saw there, now, and the cruelty, were seeds he himself had cultivated. When they have failed, they take the brand and make their own fates. We take away their only hope of rejoining their families, of taking a place at the courts of the Kaim. They have no family. They cannot control the Andat, the Dai Kovo said. We throw these boys away much as their fathers have. What becomes of them, I wonder? Much the same as becomes of anyone, I imagine. The ones from low families of the Yutkaim are hardly worse off than when they came. The sons of Kaim, once they take the brand, they cannot inherit, and it saves them from being killed for their blood rights. That alone is a gift in its own way. Andat are powerful Ota, like small gods, and they don't love being held to a single form, they fight it. And since the forms they have are a reflection of the poets who bind them, the world is full of willing victims. People who embrace a cruelty meted out against them. An Andat formed from a mind like that would destroy the poet who bound it and escape. That you have chosen action is what the black robes mean. Then the others, they all left the school too. Mila laughed, even in the cold. It was a warm thought. Or a warm sound, my apologies. No, you've all taken different paths. Ansha tried to wrestle Tayakovo's stick away from him. Ranat Karo asked forbidden questions, took the punishment for them, and asked again until Tahi beat him asleep. He was too sore to wear any robe at all for weeks, but his bruises were black enough. But you've each done something. If you choose to take up the robe, that is. Leave it, and really this is just a conversation. Interesting maybe, but trivial. And if I take it? You'll never be turned out of the school so long as you wear the black. You will help to teach the normal boys the lessons you've learned, to stand by your own strength. Ota blinked, and some emotion he couldn't put a name to, bloomed in his breast. His flight from the school took on a new meaning. It was the badge of his strength, the proof of his courage. And the Andat? And the Andat. You'll begin to learn of them in earnest. The Daikovo has never taken a student who wasn't first the black robe at the school. Ota stooped, his fingers numb with cold, and picked up the robe. He met Milakovo's amused eyes and couldn't keep from grinning. Milakovo laughed, stood and put an arm around Ota's shoulders. It was the first kind act Ota could remember since he had come to the school. Come on then. If we start now, we may get back to the school by breakfast. Last one. What I did. The boy. I didn't fail. That wasn't a failure. That was the moment of your highest honor. A slow smile came to Ota's lip, but it was deathly cold. When he spoke, there was fury in his voice. Humiliating that boy was my moment of highest honor? Mila saw Tia Tahi frown. He shook his head. This was between the boy and the Daikova now. Comforting him was. Comforting him for what I did. Yes. And yet how many of the other black robe boys would have done the same? The school is built to embody these tests. It has been this way since the war that destroyed the empire. It has held the cities of the Kaim together. There is wisdom in it that runs very, very deep. Based off of that, we have Ota basically reject the school and its teachings and leave. And that's just the prologue. We also meet Amat Kain, who is an older lady, who is senior overseer for this guy named Wilson. We also meet Wilsinka Marchat, who is the same person. And Marchat has desperately been in love with Amat for many, many years, but has never expressed his feelings to her. We also meet a younger, new student called Mati Vopathi, around the same age as Ota. But Ota, apologized to him later about, I skipped over it, but he essentially, he was making them dig in this yard and was being very abusive to this poor guy and apologized after. And so this is the same kid, but older. And he's under the tutelage of Hishai Kovo, but for sake of sanity, I'm just going to call him Hishai. We also meet a lady named Liet Chokavi. I don't know. These names are hard to pronounce. We also meet a man named Itani, who is a lover to Liet, and we will return to him in a bit. One little thing here that is a little that Itani is 20 and Liet is 17. It's a little okay. Do what you got to do. The big thing we learn, not yet. Heshai, we learn, had a lover in the past when he was young who aborted his child and left him. So that plays a big part into his self-hatred. So Seedless, like I said, is an Andat and is kind of a clone of Heshai, which is an interesting sort of dynamic there, because he hates Hishai and wants him dead because Hishai himself hates himself. Liet and Natani have this real conversation pretty early on in the book that I just thought felt real. It's nice. The big thing we kind of learn here is that Itani is actually Ota, the child from the prologue who left the school. We learn that Merchat and Seedless are working together to scheme. I have to say, my favorite character in this entire book has to be Seedless. I mean, he's not a good person, but is it really his fault? But he seems to genuinely really love and care, or at least be infatuated with, Mati. And so it is an interesting situation there with them throughout the story. And one of the most... Now, this might make you squeamish, I cannot lie, but then again, I've read R. Scott Bakker and Blood Meridian, and I've watched The Walking Dead and a lot of horror movies growing up, so it didn't really bug me as much, but I'm also not a woman. But basically, Maj, who's this girl who had a relationship with Marchat, I think, and she was pregnant and she wanted to keep the baby, but the baby was killed by Seedless, and so she's on this desperate need for revenge, and it's a whole it's kind of the big crescendo point of the book that makes it all the other dominoes fall into place. Ota goes to leave a message to I don't know. He leaves for a bit, and there's this courier talking to him about life on the sea, and suggests that he try transferring to doing that instead of doing what he's doing. But while Ota is away, the big main thing here is that Liet and Madi have been spending a lot of time together, trying to get close, or just there. It was Liet and Itani / Ota, and she really wasn't close with anyone else. So she becomes close friends with Mati, but while Ota is away, she proceeds to kiss Mati, who does not resist that. But it begins a relationship that shouldn't be had. But the thing about this book, which many other people have said, is this book is not written poorly. There's never a character in this book where I feel they made a dumb decision just because the writer didn't know what they were doing. Every decision makes sense for the characters at play. We have to remember that Ota, no matter how much training he had back in the day, Liet and Mati, these are all teenagers. I like to think I'm not that much older than teenagers, but a few more years and it'll have been a decade since high school for me, so that's a little unfortunate. But still, I'm not the most mature guy in the world. Like I'm still growing, I'm still learning. But I definitely am smarter than I was at 15 or 17. I guess Ota's pretty close to me. He's 20, so and I'm 25, so it's only a 5-year gap, I suppose. But a lot can happen in 5 years. But everything they do in this book to me makes sense for their character and where they're at this point in time. So, and then the older characters act more like older people. Like it makes sense. Even if a decision is dumb or misguided, I always feel like it makes sense for that particular character to do so. But I have some more of these notes. He took a pose that showed his impatience with her. You know quite well the mercy he'll show me in House Wilson, and Galt as a whole, and it won't be for Maj, it'll be for himself. It'll be for his city, and how much is a city worth, Amat? Even in the name of justice, if the Kai chooses to kill 1,000 Galtic babies out of their mothers, is that a fair price to pay for a city? If they starve because our croplands go sterile, is that a fair price? You want justice, Amat? I know that, but the end of this road is only vengeance. A breeze thick with the smell of the sea shifted, the windows closed. The doors to the private deck closed with a clack, and the room went dim. You're thinking with your heart. What happened was terrible, and I don't deny it. We were caught up in something huge and grotesque and evil, but be clear about the cost. One child, how many will miscarry in a single year? How many lose their children from being beaten by their men or from falling or from illness? I can think of 6 in the last 5 months. What happened was wrong. Amat, and I swear to you I'll do what I can to make it right again, but not at the cost of making things worse. He leaned forward. Her retort was finding its shape in her mind, but not quickly. They see now that it can't work. They weren't able to be rid of Seedless when he was conspiring with them. They could see now that they'd never be able to coordinate freeing of all of them at once. The experiment failed. Sure, they may try something again someday, but not anytime soon. They'll turn their efforts back to the Westlands, or maybe the South, or the islands for the time being. The war won't come here, not unless they find some way to do it safely. Amat's blood rent cold, and she looked at her hands to avoid letting the shock show in her eyes. Trade, she had thought. With Seedless gone, trade would shift. Her city would suffer, and other cotton markets would flourish. She'd been thinking too small. 8 generations without war. 8 generations of wealth the Andet commanded, the protection they gave. This was not trade. This was the first step toward invasion. And then we have this conversation between Mati and Seedless. Or is this between Ota? It might be Ota. Yeah, sorry. I won't betray you. Because there's no reason to. And because it would hurt Mati. Oh, no, I know who this is between. Never mind. Mati. I'm fond of him. He's young. And he hasn't lived in the world for very long. Perhaps. But he has the talent and the charm to escape this if he's wise. You sound like Hashai when you say that. Of course I do. Do you... I mean, you don't really care about Mati, do you? Seedless stood. He moved with the grace of ease of a thrown stone. His robe hung from him, darker than the night. His face was the perfect white of a carnival mask, smooth as eggshell, and as expressionless. The crickets increased their chirping songs until they were so loud, Liet was surprised that she could hear Seedless' voice speaking softly over them. In 10 years, I guess it was Liet, I don't know. In 10 years' time, Liet Koya, look back at this, at what you and I said here tonight. And when you do, ask yourself, which of us is kinder to him? Seedless is such a fascinating character. I love this being so much. I mean, it's not a good being. It's kind of a terrible being, but it's also there's so much complexity and nuance with that character. He was my absolute favorite thing to read about in this book, for sure. We also have one more from my phone. The undead flowed forward, lifting himself up to sit on the meeting table beside the lantern. Oh, I'll hold off on this actually. No, this is around the time. So there's this whole plot to kill Liet due to everything else going on in the book. And so they plan to use these, this building didn't have the specs right, so a couple tiles went and fell on her head and killed her. But they botched it, and they didn't kill her. They just injured her significantly, and they injured Monty, who was with her at the time. And because of that, Seedless is pissed because he's been working with these people. And so in this little quote here, the undead flowed forward, lifting himself up to sit on the meeting table beside the lantern. Marchat took a step before he knew he had done it. The undead's pale finger laced together in his smile, an expression of such malice and beauty that it could never have been mistaken for human. If Mati had died, Seedless said, his voice low as distant thunder, every crop in gold would fail. Every cow and you would go barren. Your people would die. Do you understand that? There wouldn't have been a bargain struck or threats made. It would simply have happened. And no one might ever know why. That boy is precious to you because while he lives, your people live. Also, at this time, Ota's returned, and Liet goes for another kiss while she's healing and recovering to Mati, and Mati gets upset and pulls away because he says, your boyfriend is back. This needs to stop. Mati is having dinner with his teacher, Hishai, and I didn't write it down, but they talk about justice, or Mati's like, we've learned certain things, we need to tell the Kai about this. And Hishai's like, justice, like, look at all the politicking you have to do, all the stuff to do to keep things in check and to avoid a war, and you're worried about justice. Justice is the least important thing here right now. It was such a pragmatic, cynical take versus this idealism. Even I'm not 50 yet. I'm not, I'm close to 30, I guess, but the optimism that I once had, I no longer hold in several aspects of life. I try not to be pessimistic, but it's hard to be hopeful in certain aspects. So I understand both sides, but there's this just brilliant moment because Maddie's dealing with all that. He's dealing with Liet and the adultery. I mean, I guess Liet and Oto weren't married, but still this adultery that they enacted while he was away, and the guilt that he's feeling from that. And he's trying to remain calm. He's trying to politely talk to his teacher about this, but he just starts throwing stuff. He just starts freaking out. And he sits down and he apologizes. And instead of Hishai getting mad, he just kind of gets it. And it was just a beautiful scene. I loved it a lot. Next big moment, Seedless asks Ota to kill him / Hishai. Hishai loves to drink, and he can tell him exactly when he'll be too drunk to stop it. And of course, Ota kind of says no at this point in time. Marchad also can't live with the sins that he's committed, and he's going to go down with the ship, or so he plans to at least, by writing a confession note and letting himself take the blame for everything. And then Mati is so racked with grief over betraying his friend. He tells Oto directly, "I cheated with your girlfriend." They didn't say girlfriend, but your lady. And I kind of expected like an arguing or screaming because these are teenagers, right? That's what you'd see in like a CW show today. Instead, Ota's very calm, and he just goes, "Well, I never trusted her to begin with, so." And then Maddie goes, "And now you don't trust me, nor you." And he walks out calmly, but as he goes to close the door, he uses a lot of force when he does it. And he just keeps walking on. Like I could see it on screen, like on a TV. Brilliant. He goes to see his shy. He feels no hatred. He feels a lot of anger and hate toward the people who betrayed him, but he doesn't want to harm them. He's not like that. But he also can't hurt his shy because he's got no personal beef with the guy. So instead, he goes to the one lady who does have some of a problem with him, and that's Maj. And he convinces Maj, and him and her go back to Hishai's house. Also, another beautiful little bit of writing. Again, I didn't write it down, but before Ota leaves the first time, he basically goes, "You should lock your door," and kind of muttering, Hishai goes, "Yeah, I'll lock it if I remembered to," because it seems like Hishai kind of wanted this to happen. And so Maj and Ota kill Hishai. And we don't really know what the future is going to look like at this point in time because of that. I'm sure we'll see the repercussions of all that next book, which will take place 16 years later. Amat and Marchat talk about how someday there will be war. Maybe not in their lifetime, but that there will be war. And Liet and Mati seem to have reconciled. And Ota and Maj are together, not romantically. They're just traveling together, returning her back to her where she lives. And that's kind of how things end. And I've skipped out a ton. I mean, like I said, there's been plenty of booktubers have done like a group discussion with other people. Like I said, Talking Stories just talked about why you should read this entire quadrilogy or quartet. I forget the guy's name. Red Fury Reviews or something. He did a discussion with Alan from the Library of Alexandria, Alexandria, and someone else recently. They had a discussion about that. So if you look up this book, you will find plenty of in-depth discussions about it. If you want a more spoiler-filled, in-depth discussion, you'll find a lot of interesting things there. By and large, I'll say after one single book, I am solidly a fan and solidly excited to see what else this universe has in store, as it emotionally impacted me. I'm also schizophrenic. Not actually, I'm joking when I say that, and I understand when I say things, sometimes people don't realize what I mean. I'm not a schizophrenic, but I make that joke because every time I read a book, if there is dialogue, I'm reading the dialogue out loud because one, I think it just makes me more immersed in the material, and two, I want to be an actor, so I try to use every chance I get to just kind of do random practicing, whether that be voice acting or whatever. But I'll tell you, there are certain scenes in this book, like with Mati talking to Ota, like when he confessed his sins, when he confessed to Mati, or when he confessed to Ota what he did, I was reading that section out loud as both those characters, and I had several tears flowing down while that conversation was going on. I don't know if that's because of the way I interpreted saying those lines or what exactly triggered it, but I was crying. And I gotta say, not a lot of books make me do that. So, and maybe I'm just a baby. Maybe I'm a liar. I don't know. But it hit the right notes. I don't know what to tell you. But again, it just speaks wonders to how Robert Jordan has failed, in my opinion, to successfully make me give a damn about a single one of his characters in 4 books, as opposed to this single book in way less page time, doing it in one take. And Daniel Abraham did a phenomenal job. People say this is the weakest one, and it only ramps up from here. And if this is the weakest, gosh, I'm in for a treat, and I'm so excited. So Probably not the best review I've ever done. I know I skipped over a ton of stuff, and some of the politics stuff went over my head. Surprisingly so, right? Like, I read Malazan fine. Maybe I wasn't paying enough attention. I don't know, but some of that stuff got lost in the sauce for me. I watched a couple videos. They helped me kind of get it a little bit better, but by and large, it's a good read, and you should check it out. If you want something short and sweet to get into that won't require months of your time, like a Wheel Time is going to take a long time to finish, whether you love it or not. But I think it's way worth your time, and hopefully you'll check it out. Anyway, next week we'll have what is it called? A Betrayal in Winter, which will take place 16 years later after the events of this story. So until then, guys, I guess in universe logic, I'll see you in 16 years. Till then.